In Lagos, Nigeria, the ominous presence of the Special Anti-Kidnapping Squad, SAKS, transforms the city into chaos. Angelo, a formidable figure, leads mercenaries in a violent clash with SAKS and the police. The target, Professor Stella Craig's spouse, the Director General of Nigeria's Oil and Energy Corporation, N.E.O.C, an anti-corruption advocate. The man, shielded in a bulletproof SUV with his infant, faces Angelo's menacing tactics. Unable to breach the vehicle, Angelo opts for a gasoline threat. Mr. Craig capitulates, but as SAKS intervenes, chaos ensues. A dreadlocked assailant seizes the opportunity, shooting the babysitter and taking the infant. SAKS reinforcements arrive, prompting Angelo's retreat. The dreadlocked man survives an exploding car but is subdued, while Angelo and his gang escape. The dreadlocked suspect is arrested and taken into custody, but Abayomi skillfully manipulates the system to secure his release. In a different part of the city, Paul Adima and his son Damilola share a close bond despite their differing religious beliefs. Paul looks forward to Damilola joining him at church for his sermon, but Damilola staunchly opposes it, expressing his disbelief in God. Despite Damilola's skeptical views, he's warned that such statements won't be taken lightly by Jesus in the unfolding events. Meanwhile, as Christmas approaches, a radio host discusses a recent kidnapping, erroneously describing the suspect. Unaware of the misinformation, Paul and Damilola listen to the radio. Later, journalist Victoria enters a busy editorial office, only to learn from her editor Judith that her report on a journalist's death can't be published due to insufficient evidence. Little does Judith know that the report is about Victoria's mother. In the following events, Angelo contacts Professor Craig, thrusting her into an agonizing choice, deciding between her child and husband. Overwhelmed, she pleads for her baby's life, but shockingly, Angelo callously ignores her plea, pulling the trigger and silencing the infant's cries. The father's heart-wrenching screams and the mother's sobs resonate through the phone, leaving her shattered. Angelo then informs her that to guarantee her husband's safety, she must comply with his demands, including resigning from her position at N.E.O.C. As news of her resignation spreads, public anger rises, except for General Issa, a powerful figure behind the kidnapping. Delighted with the success of his plan, he proudly announces his son as the new director of N.E.O.C. Meanwhile, Damilola, en route to uplift his father's spirits at church, faces an unexpected hurdle as SAKS members halt his cab. Mistaken for the kidnapper, Damilola endures verbal and physical abuse from Abayomi and other officers, futilely trying to prove his innocence as the scared cab driver speeds away, leaving him at their mercy. Officer Abayomi captures Damilola's image, forwarding it to his superior deputy commissioner, who stands with the real kidnapper Angelo, awaiting confirmation. Upon Angelo's nod, Damilola is forcefully led at gunpoint to the beach, despite desperate pleas. Heartlessly, Abayomi opens fire, and tragically, corruption claims the life of an innocent, leaving him sprawled in a pool of blood, facilitating the guilty's escape from justice. Meanwhile, as Paul passionately preaches forgiveness, he's interrupted by the cab driver, disbelief washing over him as he leans over his son's lifeless body. Authorities, devoid of compassion, swiftly remove the body, denying Paul proper mourning. Sachs falsely informs the media, igniting Paul's overwhelming rage. Determined, he visits the morgue, but the staff blames him for being a criminal child, refusing the body until the investigation concludes. Outside, Victoria introduces herself, affirming Damilola's innocence and offering assistance. However, inexplicably, Paul dismisses the situation. Convinced nothing can bring back his son, his sole desire is now to give him a proper burial. Reflecting on his son's death as divine retribution for past sins, during a conversation with an old friend, he refuses to accept Damilola's criminal accusation and heads to the police station. Two officers ignore him, leading to a confrontation over trivial matters. In the heat of the moment, Paul retaliates, slamming one officer's head on a table and pinning the other against a locker. Simultaneously, Victoria arrives, drawn to the commotion. Meeting Paul in his cell, she promises to arrange his release on bail. Surprisingly, Paul requests to be left alone, prompting Victoria to depart cautiously. Despite a severe beating, Paul is released the next morning without bail. Victoria awaits him at his house, shocked by his battered face. While an older gentleman attends to his wounds, a tattoo on Paul's wrist alludes to his mysterious history. Victoria hands Paul a copy of the police report, exposing its falsehood and firmly believing Damilola was framed. Despite Paul's initial inclination to leave justice to God for Victoria's safety, he unveils a different plan. Opening an old suitcase filled with military gear, he reveals his past army involvement and triggers a series of events beneath the city through phone calls. Using information from the police report, elderly individuals, and even a child, Paul successfully locates his son's killer, Abayomi, in a nightclub. Swiftly knocking him out, Paul orchestrates a chilling revenge. Abayomi wakes up strapped to a table with his co-worker similarly bound, and Paul, wielding a circular saw, advances toward the killer's groin. Trembling with fear, they eventually divulge information when Paul demands to know who took his son's life. The next morning, they are discovered bound to a pole in the streets. In Paul's absence, Victoria sneaks into his house, confiscating a memory card from his evidence board. She promptly delivers the card to Judith, containing a video of Paul interrogating Damilola's murderer, who confesses that the real kidnapper was the son of a wealthy politician, necessitating the swap with Damilola. Judith abruptly obliterates the memory card, exposing her mother's murder for unveiling perilous activities, raising concerns for Victoria's safety. In dismay, Victoria leaves the office, realizing Judith's betrayal. Judith contacts the deputy commissioner, confessing to destroying an interrogation tape of one of his subordinates. The commissioner, Abayomi, and Angelo confront Senator Depot, discovering Paul's son was wrongly accused. Depot emphasizes the old man's dangerous history, urging Angelo to act swiftly. Angelo eliminates Abayomi, instructing the deputy commissioner to frame Paul and label him a national security threat. Despite Angelo's pledge, Professor Craig's husband is found dead with their baby, devastating Victoria. Paul arrives to retrieve his memory card, but Victoria discloses its destruction. Instead, she leads him to Professor Craig, who hands over a file on oil blocks, hinting at the true culprits behind Paul's son's abduction and murder. Professor Craig implores Victoria to persist in the investigation, ensuring the battle against corruption sacrifices isn't in vain. As Victoria explores the file, she uncovers Oil Patriot, a mysterious company with confidential ownership. Paul, sensing a threat, grabs his suitcase when he hears the name. News labels Paul a wanted criminal for killing a SAKS officer, and mercenaries attempt to infiltrate his house. Quick thinking, Paul guides Victoria to a secret room, subdues intruders without fatalities, and unveils photos, raising suspicions about his identity. Angelo arrives, throwing shade at Paul's newfound religiosity. Victoria's voice startles Angelo, allowing Paul to shift the narrative. Their conversation reveals a shared history of serving under General Issa, with Angelo here to kill Paul on Senator Depot's orders. Paul seeks a confession video, leaving Angelo and crew tied up. Departing with Victoria to seek an old friend's assistance, they approach General Issa's presence together, with Paul paying respects and his friend vigilantly watching. The general attempts to resolve the situation with $1 million offer, but Paul desires only his son's body and the earlier confession. Blaming the police commissioner for delays, the general denies responsibility for the confession. Paul vows to take matters into his own hands, declaring his intent to apprehend Senator Depot and his son personally. After the general disciplines Depot, he calls in a top-notch assassin to target the Sachs crew involved in Damilola's murder. The commissioner, enraged by the crime scene, labels Paul the #1 public enemy. Meanwhile, Victoria questions her history, investigating her childhood church's financial records. Paul's friend provides information on Richard, Big Daddy, their old comrade harboring a grudge against the general. Paul encounters a woman denying any connection to Big Daddy, leading to a tip and a secret cave beneath a shop, where Big Daddy seeks vengeance against General Issa, but lacks the power to confront him. Professor Craig discloses that handing the mysterious Black Book to General Issa spared Paul's life. Asserting his capability to challenge Issa, Paul stresses the need for Craig's assistance. Amid police sirens and gunshots, Paul escapes and clarifies to the police commissioner that killing SAKS officers wasn't his intention. After revealing Damilola's fate, he requests his son's body, vowing Victoria's safety, intending to expose the true culprits. The next day, the commissioner questions the deputy commissioner about Damilola's murder report discrepancies. Before the deputy commissioner responds, the assassin fatally shoots him. As the assassin prepares to leave, a Big Daddy's female soldier eliminates him. Victoria, seeking answers, learns about Paul's presence in her past, discovering his involvement with Senator Depot in the drug trade, which had tragic consequences for those exposing the connection, including Victoria's mom. Surprisingly, Victoria's mother is shot in the head, and the unexpected killer is none other than Paul. However, when he sees little Victoria, he can't bring himself to pull the trigger. Instead, he decides to take her to Omatosho, covering all her upbringing expenses. In the present, Victoria is shocked to find her mother's killer standing before her. Outside, Angelo and his mercenaries observe Victoria's fury, even attacking the church to reach Paul. Father Omatosho takes a fatal hit, but Paul retaliates, taking down many assailants. Angelo seizes Victoria and escapes, while the general issues an ultimatum to Paul: surrender in 24 hours, or watch the girl die. Enter Big Daddy, offering assistance and curious about Paul's plan. Paul reveals that the general targeted him for sparing little Victoria's life, but he saved both of them by handing over the black book, containing information on the general and Depot's drug deals. Now aware the book still exists, Paul plans to retrieve it and strip the general of his power. Paul teams up with his old buddy TKO and Big Daddy to attack the general's farm, where the black book is held. Tango sets off explosions in the city to divert the cops' attention, and Paul surrenders to the general, while Big Daddy's female squad takes control of the farm. In a twisted game, the general forces Victoria to shoot Paul, but the situation takes an unexpected turn when Paul reveals it's out of his hands. Angelo tries to contact the farm guards without success, and the general's attempts to seek police help are futile. Meanwhile, as Big Daddy's squad breaks into the general's vault, chaos ensues, leading to a chase with the police and Angelo. The pursuit ends up in an old garage. As the women disembark from the van, Angelo searches for the safe but discovers something else. A video taken from the vault showing the general's soldiers eliminating 4 Nigerian army personnel to protect his illicit drilling operations. The squad promptly sends the video to the army, causing the police to abandon Angelo, revealing their complicity in the plan. Big Daddy's squad, armed and emerging from hiding, surrounds Angelo, forcing his surrender. While the general attempts to order Paul's execution, his men hesitate, and a nod from Paul prompts them to abandon the disgruntled general. Now desperate, the general seeks negotiations, warning of national chaos if the safe's information is exposed. However, Paul drops a bombshell, revealing it will be a military court for the general's role in killing 4 soldiers. The general, facing the same solution he proposed to Paul, attempts suicide but discovers the gun is empty. Paul departs, leaving the disgraced general behind. Labeled a coward, army officers arrive to apprehend the general, while Paul delivers justice to Angelo in front of the victim's mother and wife. In the aftermath, Paul writes a letter to Victoria, urging her to open the safe and read the black book. In a shocking revelation, he exposes Judith as the one who betrayed her mother, and Victoria herself. With the black book in hand, Victoria ensures Depot's swift arrest, and Paul bids his son a proper farewell through a burial.